Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and today I am pleased to be joined by former All-American, Patriots punter, and of course, someone that's done much more than just be an NFL athlete. There's, of course, been at least another career. Who knows where the road goes after being an athlete, but it is none other than Zoltan Mesko. Zoltan, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And before we jump into this, everyone, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, anything to help spread the word, because I want to talk to Zoltan from the jump about the man in the arena. You know, one of the first things I saw when I jumped onto you in your page on LinkedIn was this quote by Teddy Roosevelt. So maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I saw that and that really caught my eye. Did that have any significant importance to you, or did it just sort of sum up how you face challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a great one that you just threw out there and gave me a curveball. Thank you for reminding me that it was Teddy Roosevelt. But yeah, it's just all encapsulating from the standpoint of we may try really hard in life and we may fall flat on our face. Of course, you get up, and the whole cliche of like, get up 8 times if you fall seven, right? Which, funny enough, you can't do that. You got to get up 7 times if you fall 7 times. But just sometimes life doesn't actually work out in how you planned it out, and that's okay. And at the same time, it's really about the process and your effort. And yeah, and of course, it's easy as a human to focus on the outcome, right? Like, oh, I can't wait to get to this status and this level and this income level and net worth and whatnot. But at the same time, you got to look back on it. Like, what struggles did you go through? Hopefully, you enjoyed those struggles, right? And that's kind of like what it encapsulates from me, from my kind of mental algorithm that I've kind of established for myself. Now, I'm not saying I got to figure it out. I have deviated from, and I get sad when things don't work out, but I do snap back into the mentality of like, all right, let's get back on the horse.
And I'm not going to lie, I do enjoy throwing a good curveball.
Yes.
But I think that perfectly sets the tone of what being an athlete is, but also what life is. I mean, if we were always handed everything we wanted, then what would be the point? We're not
Yes.
really working or overcoming anything.
That's
And
a
this
great point.
goes.
And by the way, I might add, right, the man in the arena versus the spectators, right? It's hard to kind of switch places with people, put yourself in their shoes. So kind of like the person that's actually doing the stuff versus the critics, right? So maybe I'd like to couple that with Bob Knight's quote of having him when he dies be buried upside down so the critics can kiss his where the sun don't shine.
I love it. No, and I'm glad you added that too. The element of it's very easy to, talk about someone that's walking the walk as opposed to you getting up and trying to walk the walk. I love the quote. I'm certainly
Yeah.
a big fan.
And to again, like, this is not to the athlete, right? This is to everyone that's out there like busting their butt, right? This is to every blue collar worker that's grinding away to put food on their family's table. Like, to the critics out there, shut up, I'm doing my best, right?
Absolutely. And I actually, for me, Elon Musk is the first person that comes to mind because I can imagine for how many years, whether it was SpaceX, whether it was Tesla, whether it was PayPal, the amount of people I'm sure that told him, stop, this will never work. Like, how many critics did he have along the way being like, you will never make this happen? And time again, he put himself in the position of taking on all of the critics and the hate. And, he's certainly prevailed thus far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you want to get into the meta conversation of Elon Musk, I feel like he's, well, for sure above me, but above many from the standpoint of mentality of like, he doesn't really care about money. He's more about the mission at hand to increase the probability of human civilization survival, right? Through interplanetary travel, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I mean, that guy is absolutely beyond me. And yes, we do qualify him as nuts, but um, yeah, I mean, kudos to him for what he's accomplished.
Absolutely. So to hard segue then into football, just with this prism, whether it's Elon, that man in the arena, to me needs to have a level of mental fortitude that not everyone possesses. So when you look at just your time with the Patriots, to jump into it, if it's Bill Belichick, who's essentially the CEO of sorts, because of course there's Robert Kraft and other
Yeah.
major players within the organization, but what was it about what he did and how he carried himself and faced those spectators that allowed him to not just have success for the 3 years that you're there, but for this 20 plus year window that he's been able to be at the helm?
That's a great question, and I think Belichick does. Uh, he does probably the best job of, right. We're all human, right? We're all susceptible to get sucked into the fandom and the celebrity status that he was bestowed upon him. I guess not bestowed, excuse me. He earned it, right? But he isolates himself very well from that, and he tries to almost like a computer, right? Like operate on his algorithm that doesn't change, right? And while he may not be like a player's coach, he does have a good soft side to him as well. You don't see it very often, but he operates very much like a car mechanic, right? Oh, this component is not working. Let's get rid of it. Or this component is way too expensive. I can replace this with, the 80-20 rule and pay a tenth of the cost, right? So he's such a good mind for that, right? The ability to just shut things off. And, for example, like, one data point tells it all sometimes about people, but he always told us, like, as you're getting requests for this and sign that, and look at this bill. Well, not a monthly bill, but he still probably has a drawer where he during the season takes this autograph request and he'll shove it into his drawer, and in the off season he opens that up. So he's very good at compartmentalizing things that he needs to take care of, and again, like, separate his MO, his algorithm to how to operate the team from the rest of the fandom hoopla stuff.
Very interesting. Yeah, kind of interesting to think about. But I did want to ask, about punting in general, because one of the Super Bowls that Bill, of course, led the Patriots to was 53 just a couple of years ago. And I wanted your perspective as someone that obviously knows a thing or two about punting a football. That Super Bowl, I don't know if you'd watched it, but there was a lot of punting. They called it a defensive battle, which a lot of fans may not have appreciated. But I, for one, thought it was brilliant because it was a field position chess match for 60 minutes. Did you watch that? And if you did, did you have any feelings about basically how that chess match was played against two of maybe like the top 5 punters in the entire league?
Yeah. So was that the one with the Rams?
Yes.
Okay. I had to recall. I mean, I can only viscerally recall it, right? What I felt. So a very boring match for a spectator because I was watching it, right? So, but yeah, I still enjoyed the nuances of it. Just because I was or am a punter doesn't mean I enjoy the game as a punting showdown. So yeah, I mean, no one else does it better tactically. Again, going back to your last question of Bill Belichick, of knowing what this investment of a punt may yield further on in the game.
One thing, it feels very obvious in the short amount of time I've talked to you that football for you was a very useful vehicle to be able to have a free education that you were to then parlay into 2 degrees at a top tier school. You're able to then for a few years earn great income being an athlete, and then move to the next point of your career, your life, because it's just a small portion of who you are. But do you recall how, just going back to maybe 18, 19 years old, how you sort of were building a scaffolding of how to attack life and using the sport as a way to open doors for you?
Yeah. Well, It began in high school, where I think my freshman year in high school, the last game of the year, it was like brutally cold, and not that it matters to the story, but there was a receiver as a senior. He was going to Ohio State on a full ride, and like they just were talking about him the whole week. Of course, I was kicker punter, so I'm like, I'm not in the scouting reports, but I heard about him, and I'm like, wait, he's gonna get college paid for? That's different. And of course, back in my freshman year in high school, I was soaking wet, 6'3", 155 pounds. So literally, like, I could have been a scarecrow out there, right? Um, and I was pulling up my football pants every 10 yards I would walk. I mean, they couldn't find something that would fit me. But then I applied myself. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I'm an immigrant. My parents are immigrants, obviously. We came over with not much to our name, even though they're like, both of them are two engineers. Like, both of my parents are engineers. I was like, I have to find one way to alleviate the burden on either them or myself borrowing money for college. So I was like, this is an absolute great vehicle to do it with. Now, with that said, yeah, I applied myself. I gained like whatever 70 pounds throughout high school, and earned a full ride to Michigan, and I passed up on some other schools too, and passed up on some of the Ivy Leagues because I thought Michigan was the best kind of combo of giving me the opportunity to play professional football, perhaps, and getting the best degree. So that's why I went to Michigan. And then I really fell in love with the sport. So I started using it less as a vehicle, but it's always been in the back of my mind, like, how can I leverage this thing? And then, of course, just because you're doing something, kind of like almost like affirmations. If you hang around negative people, right, you're going to be negative. So whatever you do, you're going to absorb into kind of like your subconscious, right? So with football, I put my roots into there, my heart into there. So my identity became football, which, of course, to anyone retiring from any sport, the higher you go in the level, the harder it is to transition out of it, right? And this goes back to the conversation I had with Kevin Falk, right? The former Patriot running back, now in the Patriots Hall of Fame. He's like, dude, it's so hard after the first year, because he retired, and the following year he kind of had that conversation with me. But to that point, I always try to like isolate football a little bit, because it's like, it's not my identity, but at the same time it absorbs into you. So it's like, whether you want it or not, it becomes you, and that's how people view you. And even in meetings today, it gets brought up, like, weren't you like, so and so, and you used to punt? And funny enough, I try to downplay it as much as possible, like with a comment like, yeah, but only on the weekends, right? It was like a weekend hobby, like literally, sometimes Monday nights or Thursday nights. But yeah, I guess I don't own it as much, or I try not to, even though it's like, I know I'm downplaying it, and maybe to a certain degree others are overplaying it, right? So somewhere in the middle is the right mix, but it's almost like I'm trying to separate it from myself, because I know it's I've seen too many people like take it too far, right? Like wear their Super Bowl rings like 30 years down the road. I'm like, every day you've been wearing that? Like, okay, that's weird.
Isn't there a parallel there to what you said about Bill Belichick and how he handled trying to kind of put in a box some of the stuff that can come along with what his resume had earned, or he had earned via what he put on his resume?
Yeah, there's definitely a tie there. I agree. Yeah.
So I do have to ask though, being a punter, you made a couple tackles in the NFL. I mean, as someone that focused very heavily on getting that lower body right in just kicking, in the mental. I mean, it's very regimented, I'd imagine. How did you approach when all of a sudden an open field tackle came your way?
So here's the thing: I am a self-proclaimed, for lack of a better word, I'll use the word cat, right? I don't like to tackle, definitely on a day-to-day basis. Even in college, I kind of shied away from it. I gave it my best college try, no pun intended. Or as I like to joke around, no punt intended. In the NFL, it's like, oh my God, this is my livelihood. I'm going to war. So I remember still like Santonio Holmes from the Jets, my rookie year, was coming down the sideline, and I didn't know he weighed like 170 ish, 180 maybe, soaking wet. But I picked him up like a wrestler and I suplexed him into Rex Ryan and knocked his headphone off. So that was fun to be in the film room after that. But I was like, no, 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 I'm making this tackle because it's my job. Like not job, but it's like it's my income and my livelihood. And then probably that's my most memorable tackle that I can be. But whenever I could get in there, like I needed to get in there. And I can always hype myself up for one hit, but I'm not like the others where I can hype myself up for two a days, right? And hit every day. It's like, no.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Adam Vinatieri was a wrestler in college, or at least in high school.
I
And
didn't
like
know that.
some of
Yeah,
those guys can come in with a little more, fundamental understanding of how to, get leverage and get in, you sort of shoot in there. But you're saying that that was not you at all.
that was not me. No, absolutely
Uh,
not.
I did want to just talk about your last year, kicking in the league, because you go from the Patriots for 3 years to move semi across country. Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh to New England isn't the furthest ever, but I mean, it
Yeah,
completely new surrounding cast of characters, and you do that for, I think it was 7 games, but then it's Cincy for a game. So just being a
right.
human being, how did you deal with 3 spots in basically one year? I mean, how do you like go to Cincy for? I don't know, like. Was that literally just a couple of weeks, if that? But like to be thrust.
One week. Yeah, one
I knew
week.
it was one game, but I didn't know if like it was literally just 1 week of your life that you were there, or if it was longer.
Pretty much. Yeah, we can call it a band-aid job. Yeah.
I mean, how do you deal with just the newness in the moving around and still trying to be a professional, do your job, but everything around you is alien?
Yeah, so jumping right into the season with Pittsburgh, right? That was a completely binary experience, like, black and white experience from New England where it's like super I mean there's goal orientation everywhere, right? You're trying to win a game, but the coach player relationship was totally different, right? It was more professional and segmented and like I guess isolated in not to make that the buzzword of the interview here, but yeah, I mean, we viewed ourselves as like totally separate. So when I went to even try out with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin was out there for a tryout and talking to me about my high school experience in Cleveland, Ohio, I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, I'm not used to this. I think it's documented where I said that Mike Tomlin spoke to me probably more words in that little tryout where I earned that job that day than Bill Belichick spoke to me all my three season career in New England, right? And that's just me like maybe shying away, maybe not being as assertive, but yeah, I guess I just fell into place there, fell into place of how the treatment was done, and I don't think I was ready for that change with the Steelers. It was definitely a shock to me because right, your algorithm's kind of set one way, and then you're like, wait, what's going on?
So is it fair to say that you kind of went into that thinking it would be similar to New England? Because New England's all you know. This is how an organization is run. So you just expect it's going to be very much similar no matter where you go. And that maybe is what sort of caused the, I don't want to say confusion, but like the just the drastic change.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know like across the board, right? It's the NFL is a business, but more so than that, there's a huge like players coach mentality in Pittsburgh, and obviously it comes from the top down with Mike Tomlin. So, of course, he'll call you out like in front of a team and all that stuff if you're not doing your job or you are doing your job, which is great. So it amplifies the situation. But yeah, that was going from this side of the spectrum and you got the 32 other teams, and then you go to this side of the spectrum, right? Or I should say 30 other teams because you got New England and then Pittsburgh and then 30 in the middle.
So, when you think about your time in Pittsburgh, your time in New England, and I don't even know if, one game in Cincy is enough to really synthesize everything that they had going on there. But when you get a chance to see how different organizations are run, great organizations too. I mean, you're in Cincy in a playoff year. It's not like it was a bad year for them by any means.
Mm-hmm.
What did you take away in terms of what made good, strong organizations, good leaders, good coaches, not for you necessarily as a player, but when you moved on in life to do other things, even just be a husband, what did you take from that experience that you were able to sort of plug into, or alter your algorithm for how you should be running?
Yeah. So from all that experience kind of encapsulated into one thing, I mean, I don't think it's like there's no like silver bullet, right? But there's some fundamentals like, you know, being able to be responsible and accountable to your teammates, right? Or any right if you're managing anyone or leading anyone, right? It's just being like a trusted companion. Of course, having sort of a circle of trust, like somewhat of a like be open with me. And I think toxic organizations, right? I'm talking about companies as well. They tend to be more so like fear driven. And I think you can get that at, even with the Patriots, right? Where it's kind of like, oh my God, I'm protecting my job. But it's across the board. Like the NFL is very much execution oriented, right? So there's no guaranteed contracts. There's guaranteed money, but there's no guaranteed. It's still week to week, especially on a rookie contract or punter, kicker. I mean, yeah, they'll cut you whatever a multi-million-dollar check if you're signing a second or third deal as a guarantee, but you're still on the bubble very much so because it's like you got to get the job done. You got to be the right component in that engine to fire the whole machine on all cylinders. So, but again, I deviate from the answer. Is like it just there's some simple stuff where it's just kind of like as a leader, like you just try to be the lead blocker and get things out of the way of your team so they can succeed, right? So they don't have to think about things. Like I think even from the standpoint of Bill Belichick, as some people may say, he's the one playing chess and the others are playing checkers. Well, don't you worry. Like his players are still playing checkers, if not something more simpler, because he just tells you like, going back to the motto of like do your job. Um, it's just like, Steve, I want you to take one step here, then take a left turn, and then block that guy. And that's all I care. Right. But to him, it becomes complex because the simple things add up. But to the players, it's all simplified. It's more simple than anyone else. Right.
Got it. Um, I just wanted to ask quickly about punting itself. One thing that, whether it's kicking, punting, or long snapping, those special teams group, I would imagine that you have to walk a very fine line of how much you should train and not overtrain, and just making sure that that left leg is always ready to go. How hard was it for you to just sort of find what that balance was for you and make sure that you never deviated too far in any direction to make sure that the leg was right, but also the mind too?
Yeah. I think to my benefit and my detriment, I always overdid it. Starting in high school, that's what I always wanted to like. If the threshold is here to getting better, I always wanted to exceed it. Now, again, to my detriment, sometimes that causes regression, right? So it's like, don't overdo it. I think I had to learn that, and I'm still learning it today with my work hours, right? Logging in at night to knock out that extra email or whatever. Um, I'm still learning it, but I do realize like there is a sweet spot where you must reach it and don't burn the candle at both ends, because you might get away with it for a couple days, couple months, couple years, but one day it's going to come down crashing. And of course you get your warning signs way before then, like a symptom, right? When you get sick, so you can correct, but you must have those places, at least your standard deviation in place. It's like, oh, I'm getting off track, come back, come back. So
Got it.
hopefully that answers your question.
No, but it does. Because I just, for guys that have such a very specific routine, that like three steps, and like just to
Yeah.
be a creature of habit and not overdo it. To me, it's just interesting to see how one grapples with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
do. I do a little guest lecturing for a sales and marketing course, And I was telling the students that from the standpoint of like punting, for me, it was very repetitive. So there was not a lot of like deviation. So man, I would have loved to at least play quarterback or linebacker, just kind of some develop some flow to the game and get into it. Because punting did feel like a assembly line for me. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of like golf, but even in golf, you get different shots. And so you do so as well in punting, and you get different crosswinds and stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like to the three steps and all that, like it's very true. Like it's very repetitive.
Yeah, mechanical. Like at least in golf, you can get a different club here and there.
Exactly.
Uh, so when I think about punting, to me it's just sort of a paradox. The more you see the punter, the worse the team is. Generally speaking, I mean the teams that, because when you're a Patriot, right? You know, the bottom five in punting every year. Did it ever sort of cross your mind that the more you played, the worse the team was? Not to say that the better you were, the worse. Like it's not as drastic as that, but it's strange that the more fans, the going back to the man in the arena, the more the spectators see you, the more likely they will be to not be happy to see you.
Correct. Correct. Now there are games, right, like Super Bowl 53, where that component needs to fire up a little more. Again, I'm using the analogy of a engine, right? So we're using our four-wheel drive more. Glad we had a good one, right? So that's why you must optimize all your reserves and all the things that you might not use. Of course, if you're not going to use it on a regular basis, then don't pay for the best of breed, right? So Patriot, I guess, Jake, the current punter, right, for the Patriots was an all-pro. So, but to their, to their liking, they did a great job of drafting him, right? They didn't grab the all-pro punter from another team and pay that punter because he's not going to be utilized as much. Now, I'm talking about perhaps, right? We're only one season into not having Tom Brady. So, he's definitely backed up a lot more on a consistent basis, game after game, because, right, it wasn't a winning percentage. They weren't a winning team this year, right? The Patriots. So, yeah, that definitely correlates, inversely correlated to how well a punter does and how well a team does.
Got it. Well, obviously, you were someone that has been on a path to do more than just play football. When you thought about leaving the game and leveraging those degrees, basically, how did the road get you to Snowflake, and how have you just sort of navigated what was uncharted waters?
Yeah, funny enough, I thought I'd realize it myself what this next move might be in my career path, but one of my college professors who I stayed in touch with, and he was an executive at a tech company in sales, and he just kind of prescriptively told me, like, you need to be in sales. And I was like, all right, well, I've tried private equity. Funny enough, I've dabbled in even in the Hollywood space or whatever, just kind of like to get a taste of it. I probably tried out a couple more things. I went to some, the NFL offers up a lot of like boot camps to get your feet wet and stuff. And I was like, you know what? If this guy who's been very successful, right, tells me that I need to do something and he sees it, right, kind of like maybe I'll pat you on the back here, right? Your questioning is very good. So to your kind of advice for you, like keep going with this because I love the way you question things and how you kind of prepare for your meetings. But in that sense, he saw the same thing in me, and told me to go into sales. And this is another question I answered the other day to the students is kind of like Mike Rowe talked about from Dirty Jobs, right? He's like, I don't believe in like finding your passion, right? He more so believes in you take your passion with you. If you're monotone about a subject like, oh, like, I don't know, filing your taxes, or maybe that's a bad bad example. I think there's a threshold to be met to be like passionate about something, but maybe like, I don't know, racing cars or something. And then you're really monotone, like, oh, the carburetor's bad. You know, sound like Belichick basically. But of course he's passionate, right? Doesn't come through your voice all the time. But if you can't take it to anywhere else, you know, you're a lost cause to begin with, right? You take your passion with you. So I did find like a passion there in sales. Of course, winning solves everything. So if things are going well, right? Like if you are the world's greatest spitter and you get into these spitting contests and you start making bets and you're just winning money, like that's fun. That becomes fun. You're like, you can just challenge people and like get creative with it. Like I can spit 120 feet. You can only do it 10 feet. Like, isn't that fun to just crush people? Like winning is fun. That's what I'm trying to say. It fixes a lot of things.
Certainly does. I mean, who knows how old that saying is, but I mean, anyone that's been around sports has heard that, let alone, you know, as you said, it could go to spitting. You don't need to be in sports to be familiar with it.
And if any of your listeners are kind of like, wow, these analogies and examples are just out of this world, I apologize, is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Don't apologize.
Yeah.
Well, man, I want to wrap this up with this little thing that I call the gauntlet. I got a couple quick questions for you, man. And I want to know from the jump, what's most important? Is it having the number one offense or number one defense?
So if you have a number one offense, by the way, obviously this is a convoluted answer. I like to have all components, right? But if you have the number one offense,
you're not going to like this segment then.
Yeah, I'm bad. I'm always like the guy that A, B, C, D, multiple choice. And I'm like, why can't there be an E? Because if I think of this situation, then, you know, I got to write the response in. But I'll go with the offense, because if you can run the ball and pass the ball and sometimes hit a big play, I mean, you're keeping those guys off the field, the other offense off the field. So it's kind of like, it's almost like your offense is defensive, I'll call it.
Yeah, your weapon is so much better that the other weapons don't matter.
Yeah, it's not going to get utilized because we're just doing 7 and 8 minute drives and we're still putting points up.
Right. Well, what is your favorite sports memory?
I have to go back.
Or one of
favorite sports memory. I mean, I think very cliche, but it goes back to like the locker room environment. I think just having the people around you, like if you have good people around you, I think you can work at any institution, company, organization and have fun with it. Like I don't care filing taxes for people. If you can just have good people around you to have, you know, people that you can have a beer or two with, right? And get along with, that's really what it comes down to. Because you could be working at SpaceX, something that sounds cool, and it's a very toxic environment. Again, I don't know the environment, but it'd be great to couple it with great people. I think that's where it starts. So
definitely, yeah. And I've heard many of you guys say camaraderie, basically, in a nutshell, for their favorite memory. Well, all right. Pregame ritual. Was there anything that you had to do, any song that you had to listen to before you went out there?
My roommate was very creative. And I got interviewed for a magazine one time, and it was like write-in answers. So he chimed into my ear. He's like, you should tell him something crazy. Like you dump 3 cups of yellow Gatorade and 2 cups of red Gatorade on your head. And I wrote that in. But no, I was very, the ritual was pretty crazy to a certain extent of like, wow, I can't believe like all this stuff has to happen in kind of subsequent order or serial order. It's almost like I don't even want to reveal some of the stuff I went through. Kind of like, you know, making sure your pads are the right shape, like trimming them down, like taping up your shoes or whatever, right? I mean, everyone does that, but it's kind of like it becomes really weird how everyone has at least sometimes a 90-minute ritual for a game. Like once you get into the locker room, not even before then, like in the hotel, right? And at least it kind of gets your chemicals ready to fire, because it's like you're telling your body, like, I need you to fire on all cylinders here in about 3 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. We're all creatures of habit in one way or another.
Yeah.
But I got another question that you're going to hate. What's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
Depends on the sport. Are you talking about football?
Yes, for this football.
Yeah. In football, I'll call it scheme, right? Because it's like, how many times have we had the surprise victory, right? In basketball, like if you have LeBron James and he's on a high school team, let's isolate him. We're just gonna win the NCAA tournament with him. You go to the corner. We'll get you to shoot like decent amount of 3-point percentage so that they kind of respect you. But we're just gonna isolate LeBron James and win the NCAA tournament, right? In football, that's different, right? Everyone's got to do their job because you can take advantage of a weakness so easily, right? If your receiver can't catch, then I'll take my cornerback off of him and I got an extra blitzer.
Definitely. Well, Zoltan, to wrap this up, the one question I love to end this on is always, what is the best piece of advice, considering everything you were able to accomplish, again, not just as an athlete, but to have a successful career after being, an athlete? What's the one piece of advice that you would, leave this on for any young student athlete out there?
All right. Another convoluted answer, but I'll go with this one. So my motto is, and by the way, I'm still hungry, right? So I'm not in retirement age per se in my 60s or whatnot, but my mentality today is that I want to work for the rest of my life and keel over whatever in my 80s, 90s, hopefully. You knocking on wood here. I will now, to that extent, I would like to work like 10, 15, 20 hours a week at that point, but I still want to feel productive. Like, I actually don't know what I would have done had I come out of the NFL in my mid 30s, late 30s, maybe 40 years old, still having punted, being financially set. I almost don't want to imagine it sitting on the couch. Now, I don't think I would have sat on the couch. I would have gotten involved in something because I'm always going. But again, like, I encourage people to just keep contributing, keep feeling like they're contributing, do something. It's almost like, and do something useful, right? That benefits society and the others around you. Even if your ripple, only carries like 6 months after you die, I think that's a pretty good accomplishment.
Yeah, legacy is a very important thing to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, Zoltan, we didn't even talk about the immigrant background, the Michigan days. There's a lot we left out, but that's all we have time for today. So I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk a little bit about your ride so far. And as you said, we'll obviously continue going for quite some time.
Yeah, much appreciated, Steve, and best of luck to you.